Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day. I'm Azman Makmur. This presentation is for the thesis proposal with title The Influence of Enterprise Risk Management Framework Towards Company Performance at Conglomerate Group of Companies. This proposal is consists of three main chapters, namely Introduction, Literature Review, and Methodology. In Chapter 1, Introduction will have 10 sub-chapters, as shown on the screen. In establishing Chapter 1, these are the initial brainstorming points that have been discussed in this chapter. Introduction in Chapter 1 is started with the need of risk management in organization due to risk and uncertainty in current world business environment. Risk management is an essential business planning and has financial impact to the company. However, no reliable and standard method to assess relationship between company performance and ERM implementation, and this study is to see the influence of ERM framework on the company performance, specifically on the conglomerate group of companies. Background of the study will touch on the current existing ERM frameworks that exist, which are COSO ERM framework, ISO 31000 Risk Management Framework, and CAS framework. Here also we discuss on how the risk management being governed in Malaysia through Bank Negara Corporate Governance, Malaysia Companies Act 2016, Malaysia Code of Corporate Governance, and Bursa Malaysia requirements. In the background of the study also, we introduce the study scope area, which is DRB Highcom Berhad, as a chosen conglomerate group of companies. Issues and challenges of this study. All companies are only complying to the requirements without gauging the effectiveness of the ERM implementation in their organizations. Even though they believe there are a good impact from the ERM implementation in their organization, but due to non-existence of reliable method to determine the ERM effectiveness and performance, most of the organization do not really care on how they manage their risk as long as the implementation is meeting the requirements. The problem statement for this study are: 1. There is no standard and reliable method to assess the relationship between company performance and ERM implementation. And 2. Previous studies failed to solve the problem in assessing the relationship between company performance and ERM implementation. Therefore, the study is to envisage how the ERM framework established by COSO affecting company performance at conglomerate group of companies. For research questions, researcher has established 9 questions as shown on the screen, which need to be analyzed in this study. All the questions are derived from the inquiry on relationship between company performance with 8 components in COSO ERM framework, which are internal environment, objective setting, environment identification, risk assessment, risk response, control activities, information and communication, and lastly is monitoring. The research question also include the inquiry on what is the most influential factors in ERM framework towards company performance at conglomerate group of companies. This research is focusing in examining the influence of ERM framework towards company performance in conglomerate group of companies, and to understand current stage of ERM implementation in the Highcom Group. Based on the research question, this study will focus on these 9 objectives that need to be achieved. Expectation of benefit from this study is beneficial to the organization board of directors by providing a measure on ERM effectiveness level. Secondly, to group risk management division of holding company by providing insights of ERM implementation across the group of companies. And lastly, to the researchers by providing reliable ERM measurement for their further study. Scope of the study is to determine the status of the enterprise risk management implementation performance in the Highcom Group of companies for 5 consecutive financial years from 2015 to 2019. The aspects that will be looked into are company performance determinants such as market value, revenue, gross profit, profit before tax, return of equity, and return of asset. And another determinants that we will look are from ERM framework components. The definition of the key terms in this study are shown as per screen. This study is organized into 5 chapters, where Chapter 1 mainly on the introduction of the study, Chapter 2 is on the literature review, Chapter 3 on the research methodology, Chapter 4 on the study analysis and findings, and finally, Chapter 5 is on the study recommendation and conclusion. Chapter 1 summary is as per shown on the screen. Chapter 2 consists of 9 sub-chapters, namely Introduction, Theoretical Foundation, Overview of Topics, Dependent Variables, Independent Variables, Previous Research, Research Conceptual Framework, Hypothesis Framework, and the chapter summary. In literature review, there are 3 main parts, which are Part 1, Theoretical Foundation and Topics Overview with Definitions, Part 2 is on Variables and Previous Studies, and Part 3 is on Hypothesis Development, Research Conceptual and Framework. Theoretical foundation for this study is formed based on the review of previous major scholar works on ERM performance. Based on these related 18 major researchers, the study found there are 4 main types of study in ERM performance, which illustrated as per shown on the screen. And based on this study is fall under type number 3, which is studying the relationship between ERM implementation and value creation. By tracing back the related researchers for 10 years before, the researcher has listed 34 previous studies that have similarity on their studies with this study, in terms of the title, research theory, and research methodology. And based on this review, there are 5 researchers found have high similarity with this study. The critiques on these 5 researchers are shown as per screen. Based on these critiques, the researcher found the insufficient of determinants or components used as a measurement variables. The overview of the study topics will provide an explanation of the risk management, ERM definitions, and its frameworks. Based on previous research, this study found the measurement on company performance was unreliable due to previous studies measured on 1 or 2 dependent variables of company performance. Thus, in this study, we'll measure company performance on market, financial and accounting components as dependent variables for this study. Independent variables for this study are adopted from ERM COSO framework, which consists of 8 components as shown on the screen. These 8 components will produce a measure for ERM framework implementation level of organization. 5 selected previous researchers which have been high similarity with this study are analyzed on their authors, research title, samples that have been used, research dependence and independent variables, and research methodology are explained as shown on the screen. All the studies are using quantitative in their studies and utilizing COSO ERM frameworks as their independent variables. However, the dependent variables are either insufficient or inconsistent. The research conception framework for this study is as per shown on the screen. From the survey, all components of independent variables will be measured, and based on the hypothesis for each independent variables towards company performance will be analyzed and measured to view the influence of the ERM framework towards company performance. These are the 8 hypotheses that have been developed in this study. All the hypotheses will view the impact from each ERM framework components towards company performance. The summary for Chapter 2 is as per shown on the screen. For Chapter 3, there are 10 sub-chapters as shown on the screen. In this chapter, the research methodology will be explained, which consists of research design, variable measurement, sampling design, data collection, survey establishment, data processing, and analysis. And lastly is on the research validity and reliability. The research design for this study consists of research strategy, research philosophy, and research method. On screen is shown the ERM framework and companies perform variables models. For dependent variable, It is formed from market valuation and financial valuation. In financial valuation, there are income valuation and accounting valuation. For independent variables, all the components of COSO ERM framework are selected as independent variables. In sampling design, sampling population will be conducted in DRBICOM group of companies, which there are 40 plus companies that implementing ERM in their organization. Target population is to all subsidiaries. Target samples is the experienced officer in risk management, and the sampling techniques are the expert sampling. This is the data collection procedures in this study. Main data sources for this study are coming from primary source, which coming from conducted survey, and other source is from secondary data, which can be extracted from annual report, financial statement, and annual account report. In building a survey, questionnaires are developed with details as shown on the screen. This is the survey instruments that adopted from COSO ERM framework in the survey questionnaire. This is the checklist that being used to ensure the survey is adequately developed. In processing the data obtained from survey, researchers use SPSS to check, editing, coding, and transcribing the data. For statistical analysis, descriptive analysis is chosen to summarize the data from a sample by using indexes such as the mean, median, mode, range, variance, and standard deviation. Other analysis methods that used in this study are cluster analysis and factor analysis. Factor analysis consists of principal component analysis and partial least square regression. The tool that being used in this study is IBM SPSS. SPSS is statistical package for social sciences, and it's used by various kinds of researchers for complex statistical data analysis. Validity is defined as the extent to which a concept is accurately measured in a quantitative study. In this research, the validity method that used is expert consensual validation from other experts who familiar with topic under study at various stages of the research process. This involves independent analysis of the data by others, for example, supervisor or judge panels. Reliability relates to the consistency of a measure by completing an instrument meant to measure motivation should have approximately the same responses each time the test is completed. To measure the scale of reliability of this research, Cronbach alpha measurement method is used. Cronbach alpha is a measure of internal consistency, that is, how closely related a set of items are as a group. Cronbach alpha, or also known as coefficient alpha, was developed by Lee Cronbach in 1951. In Chapter 3, the major topics that been discussed are on the research design, variables and measurement, how the sample being designed, data collection process, survey development, statistical analysis methods, and validity and reliability. This is the end of my presentation, and I personally would like to thank here to Dr. Mus Mulyadi in guiding and supervising me in this study proposal preparation. Thank you.